Hello and welcome. This is episode 88 of the Chills of Will podcast. And this is the reason that I get to do, or this is the reason that I love doing such a podcast like so, where I get to speak to incredible people like Father Greg Boyle. Father, it is a pleasure to have you. How are you today?
Good. It's good to be with you.
Oh man, Father was the officiant, was the priest at our wedding in 2014. And Father, I honestly still have people talking about that homily that I'm sure you don't remember because you've had a million like that. But I still have people talking about it, and it was an honor to have you then, and it's an honor to have you here. I hope you're doing well. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a long day because I was in New York last week, so it's like everything piles up. So the our reception area was, as we say in Spanish, a manicomio, a
Hey,
madhouse. It was a madhouse.
oh my gosh.
Very loud and a little bit of tension every once in a while because when you have that many people.
Right, right. I wonder how has COVID affected Homeboy? I mean, obviously, such a big part of what you do is the hugging and the hellos and the pats on the back and the being together. How has COVID affected everything with it with Homeboy?
Well, certainly the hugging has returned.
Nice.
People have masks inside.
Okay.
So probably the first 3 months we were all on lockdown like everybody was, and then
Mhm.
the mayor deemed us a an essential organization. So we pretty much returned, and then they kind of got all these protocols. They put me in kind of a tent in the parking
Mhm.
lot
Uh-huh.
because the homies were petrified that I would get COVID, and because I have leukemia, and so it was kind of Lawrence of Arabia, a huge
Mhm.
Casbah.
Mhm.
And and then everybody moved back in. So there were a
Yeah.
lot of, it really went on forever, but I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know.
Right.
But, we were pretty full. And, we went through that, checking temperatures and everybody's supposed to be vaccinated by the first.
Okay.
So I hope that happens.
Yes. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not essential, I don't know what is. So that's great that the mayor was able to help with that essential
Yeah,
designation.
and then we kind of we pivoted to do this thing called Feed Hope, where we addressed food insecurity in Los Angeles County. So we've prepared almost a 500,000 um,
Wow.
meals during the time of the pandemic,
Uh-huh.
and still are doing it. We
Wow.
we located a kitchen outside of our place that could, you know,
Mm-hmm.
kind of get set up, and so the homies went 2 by 2 in cars, and they would deliver all these meals to shut-in seniors and
Mm-hmm.
homeless.
Mm.
And so that's continuing to this day.
Oh, that's beautiful. I I wonder if you've had more people coming for services, like this idea that maybe more people are at home. Has it been hard for people who would want or need your services to get in touch with you? If it's kind of thing like, oh, I can't come in, I'm not going to reach out. It's not the same. Have you seen a big difference in that way?
Well, I don't. It's hard to retrieve right now. I mean, I think it was, when people, our trainees stayed home, and we did a lot of Zoom stuff, therapy classes,
Sure.
educational stuff,
Mm-hmm.
GED tutoring and such. And now, it just feels packed.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like pre-COVID packed, although we're all just wearing masks,
Sure.
ostensibly keeping distance, but it's hard to keep distance when we're that packed.
Mm-hmm.
All the more reason for everybody to get vaccinated. So,
Yes.
but yeah, we're kind of back to it. And of course, gang violence is about a lethal absence of hope. And on the
Mm.
front page of the LA Times today was again another article about the 30% increase in homicides, and most
Mm.
of it gang related, some of it transient related, they called it,
Okay.
like homeless folks.
Right.
So, but it's still the same thing. I mean, the pandemic didn't invent despair, but it exacerbated it. And so it stands to reason that there would be, kind of a difficulty in rebounding. So
Definitely. Yeah. Well, yeah, your the introduction to your latest book was written, I mean, seems like very recently. Obviously, the book just came out last week. Congratulations. Your
thank you.
your fourth, if you include G-Dog and the Homeboys, which was written more so about you. But the book is called The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, which is such an awesome title. But yeah, the introduction is about, you talk about how there's been this, how it's been exacerbated, the, racial issues or racial inequalities and poverty and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I guess it just makes sense, right? That there would be an increase in poverty, increase in homicide, increase in violence, and that kind of thing. Makes a
Yeah,
lot of
if
sense.
people have a hard time conjuring up an image of what tomorrow is, then the present is going to be chaotic, and that's kind of what has happened. So hopefully, as we all move back into hopeful, purposeful living, then you can, but again, nobody healthy, whole, or well
Right.
is out shooting people.
Right. Right. Have you been able to visit the detention centers? I mean, you go to a dizzying number of detention centers and juvenile camps and stuff. Have you been able to celebrate mass?
Not too many. I mean, that was shut down for a long time, and then it's resurrected again. But a lot of the places have shut down. There were 3 juvenile halls, now there are 2.
Okay.
I used to go to 20 probation camps. Now there are 3, 4, maybe 6.
Oh, man.
From 20 to 6 is that's a big change.
Wow. Where's
So,
everybody go?
and then a lot of them have been very strict, so I'll go say mass at one place and there'll be 3 kids, and because the population is lower, but also, they're short staffed, and I don't know.
Right.
And they're not going inside. So they're outside, and it's a challenge.
I bet. Oh man. You are LA born and bred. You were born in, I believe, 1984, is that, or 1988?
54.
Oh, okay. More or less, right?
Proud of it.
And you are one of 9 or 10?
10 if you count my parents, but there are 5 girls and there are 3 guys.
Oh my gosh. And you fell towards the younger side?
I'm right in the middle. I'm number 4 out of 8.
Okay. Besides fighting over the morning paper and over the cartoons and things like that, what was that like? I mean, were you a mass on Easter and Christmas family? Were you a mass every Sunday? Were you a mass 2 times a week? How did that
We were like a Norman Rockwell painting. I mean, we all walked 2 by 2. The guys had to be outside, closer to the street on the sidewalk. Ostensibly, if the car came up on the curb, the guys would get creamed. That was a thing. I remember that was ingrained in us. And we'd all marched, all 10 of us would march to church at St. Brendan's Church every Sunday, 2 by 2.
Oh,
and
man.
yeah, so I mean, we went to sometimes, during Lent, we'd go sometimes during the week. My parents went to mass every day.
Right. Oh, wow.
And then my brothers and I, we were all altar servers. So so sometimes we'd get up at the crack of dawn.
Well, my first teaching job was at Daniel Murphy Catholic, right down the street, I believe, from the area where you're talking about. Great, good old St. Brendan's. What were you into as a kid? What were you, didn't have to be reading, but what were you reading? Were you like, following the Dodgers when they came a few years later? Were you big into sports? What were you?
Oh yeah, I remember seeing the Dodgers first play in the Coliseum of all places.
Oh yeah.
Before they built Chavez Ravine. And the Angels, we used to watch the Angels, but we were big Dodger Dodgers, Lakers, but mainly Dodgers.
Mm.
And in those days, you could, I can't remember, you could get in for $2 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the thing we'd do. We'd get our way over to Dodger Stadium and go in. Once we had a vehicle, or my older brother had a vehicle, we'd fill the car and go see Dodger games.
Hmm.
We did a lot of things. There were so many big families on my block that you had built in everything. So we could take over the street and have, football games, touch football. And you just had enough players to rotate people in and out. I mean, it was kind of glorious.
Mm-hmm.
And so, families had 10 and 8, and we were up there 6, and then our backyard had like the premier basketball court. So everybody came to play basketball at our house.
Mm-hmm.
And we would ride bikes. I was telling a homie the other day that as we went to New York, and as we were driving from LAX, you could see all of downtown. I said, see that tiny building over there? It was the City Hall. I said, when I was a kid, that was the tallest building in Los Angeles. And now you can barely even see it.
Right.
But my brother and I and friends, we would, every Sunday, we would ride our bikes to downtown, and it was a ghost town. Nobody lived there. Nobody worked there. Nobody went there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to imagine, but literally we had the entire streets to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we would take these hills and ride our bikes, and it just seems so weird now. I mean, Tom Bradley was mayor, and he started to build downtown, and now it's packed with traffic all the time and with people.
Right.
But it wasn't then. So that was kind of our childhood.
Did you have family friends who were priests? Were you pressured to become a priest? Was that something that was on your mind from a young age?
No, I don't. Do people get pressured to become priests? I've never seen that in my experience. Maybe people did. Mm-hmm. Maybe the generation ahead of me did. But I was educated by the Jesuits. I love the Jesuits. They were both prophetic and hilarious, 2 qualities I liked. It was during the Vietnam War, so Daniel Berrigan, FBI was looking for him. I liked that. I thought that was pretty amazing. I can remember I went to see Trial of the Catonsville 9, which played at the Mark Taper Forum in LA. And I knew that, and I was a senior in high school, and as the lights were going down, somebody told me this years later, which I didn't know, but as the lights were going down, and all of a sudden you hear this voice, "Good evening, this is Daniel Berrigan."
Whoa.
And all these FBI agents in the audience go running backstage. Well, it was a recorded message. And I don't know, again, I opposed the war, and I was at that age where I kind of went, oh, well, I like these guys. Mm-hmm. I'll have what they're having. Mm-hmm. Now, I had an uncle who was a Jesuit, my dad's younger brother.
Okay.
And but I didn't really know him until I became a Jesuit. So he wasn't part of the reason I became the Jesuit. I just loved the Jesuits. They were fun, and they were on the cutting edge, and they paid attention to you, and it was really about joy. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about cleverness.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Loyola High School, Gonzaga University, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
So I did a couple years undergrad at LMU, and then I graduated from Gonzaga.
Nice. And then, of course, LMU for master's. I'm Jesuit High, Santa Clara. LMU for teaching. My dad went to Gonzaga. My parents went to USF. The Jesuits have been so great. My grandpa was an Italian immigrant, son of an Italian immigrant. His father died in the flu epidemic of 1918. Mm-hmm. They had no money to their name, and one of the Jesuit priests in San Jose gives him his first baseball glove, right? Helps them pay the rent, helps them pay the bills. He ends up becoming a minor league baseball pitcher. He goes to Bellarmine High. The Jesuits, like you said, they're so smart, they're so educated. They've been around the world. I remember Father Paul Fitzgerald, right?
Yeah.
At Santa Clara. I mean, he knows enough Polish to show a movie in Polish and translate. We'll talk about your time in Bolivia, and they're Spanish speakers, and they speak Japanese, and just so educated, like you said, just men of the world, and so much joy, for sure.
Well, I'm the exception to the educated, smart one, but
no.
But certainly Paul is amazing.
Yes, I mean one of so many. You got your master's in English, right, at LMU?
I did. I was ordained in '84, and I don't know when I started. I guess I started in '84, and I finished it in, I don't know, '86 or something.
Okay.
And I just did summers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why. I mean, I enjoyed teaching at Loyola High School, but I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I mean, I knew I would want to be a Jesuit, so I was already that. But what am I going to do as a Jesuit? So I just kind of, I liked English literature, so I went actually with a specialty, I guess, in Shakespeare. So I did that, and now what? So then I did. I got ordained in '84, and I spent a summer where I didn't really speak Spanish really at Dolores Mission, and then scheduled to go to Cochabamba, Bolivia to really learn Spanish. But I was supposed to go to Santa Clara to kind of work there.
That's right.
And then I had to come back to Berkeley to do my 4th year of theology, and by then I was just ruined by my experience in Bolivia that I couldn't go to Santa Clara. It wasn't no diss to Santa Clara.
Sure.
I love Santa Clara, but it was kind of not enough for me. I wanted to work with the poor, and suddenly they needed a pastor at Dolores Mission, so it was timely, and so they sent me there.
I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more. How did Bolivia ruin you?
Well, because it was the poorest country in the hemisphere, poorer than Haiti at the time.
Sure.
And it was really intense. And yet I found in the people a kind of remarkable resilience and goodness and nobility that I just soaked it up, and it altered my heart enough to kind of, I had kind of culture shock when I came back. And even living in Berkeley, it was just kind of too much. So thank God for my provincial who just listened to me, and he said, all right, how about this? I go, great. I don't think I fully knew I was going to be pastor at Dolores Mission. I just figured because I was so young and green that I would be somewhere, way down on the totem pole.
Sure.
And the pastor, an old revered Mexican Jesuit, had enough, and he went back to Mexico. And then there I was, the youngest pastor in the history of the diocese. They didn't make priests that young, pastors ever.
Right.
But nobody wanted to go there except me. So it worked out.
How the supposed reason for you going to Bolivia, the main reason was to learn Spanish, right? You tell that great story about coming up with the mass and not really knowing fully to speak the Spanish kind of off the cuff, and there was a woman, or there was a translator there for, pardon me, what would the language be of the indigenous?
Quechua.
Right. That beautiful story about sounds like you were kind of like stranded, right? Literally on top of a mountain. Everyone.
They left me there. I was hearing an old woman's confession, and I had just had the worst mass ever because I had forgotten my booklet. So I had to make up stuff, and I couldn't make up stuff in English, let alone in a foreign language. So I had a Bible, so I was any part of the Bible I could find where Jesus took bread and broke it. And I just, oh, it was horrible. And then they said, well, can you hear this person's confession? And it went on forever. And then they left me there, which I couldn't believe. And it was way at the top of a mountain.
Mhm.
And then I tell the story of this old campesino who comes towards me, and he calls me Tatay, which is Quechua for Padrecito.
Mm.
And he says in Spanish, gracias por haber venido, thanks for coming. And then he reaches into this tattered suit coat he has, and the two front pockets are, and these Indians, the Quechua Indians, cultivated all these flowers that they would carry like beasts of burden down the hill to the marketplace to sell. So flowers were in abundance. It was a beautiful place. And so he reached in and he had all these rose petals, and he invited me to incline my head. And so I did. And he just dropped these rose petals that were unending, like the clown car in the circus. It just, it didn't end. And so, and
Wow.
I was just, made me weep.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
And I always say that I went back to that little village many times to say mass and do a variety of things. And I saw everybody, but I never saw that guy again.
My gosh. Wow. Wow. I love how in the book it's, you know, Tatay, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah.
Right. How it's, you know, it's kind of, I don't know what you call that, Spanglish or Quechua-ish, or right. And I don't, what's the word, Adonai, Adonai?
Adonai is
that God, or is that?
Yeah. Adonai is, yeah.
I guess when maybe in the Hebrew or Aramaic, and I was just reminded of that for some reason. It was
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Right. Just the Tatai,
Adonai. Yeah.
what a beautiful title, right?
It's funny, I don't know what exactly it means, Adonai. We could go to the Google machine.
Sure.
I have a homie who writes me from prison, and he always says Adonai Gregory.
Uh-huh.
And I don't even know what it means. I should know.
Oh man. Well, I was hoping you'd help me out there because I was throwing it out there. All right. Yeah,
Oh no, I have no. Remember the thing about you said about smart and educated Jesuits?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, count me out.
Oh, Father, I can't
All
believe.
right, it's Hebrew.
Okay.
It's Hebrew, and it just means my Lord.
All right.
Or it's plural, actually. It's my lords.
Okay.
Is the plural form of Adon, Lord.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go. I appreciate that. Tattoos on the Heart was 2010. Barking to the Choir 2017, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then the latest, like a week ago, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness. And the first book I ever read about you was G-Dog and the Homeboys by Celeste Freeman. I don't know how you pronounce the last name.
Freeman.
Right. That was during, I mean, you call it the decade of death. I know the uprisings, the riots of 92 were a turning point in some way, but what was it, 88 to 98, right, was as bad as it got at the time, and hopefully as bad as it does get. And
in 1992 we had 1,000 gang-related homicides, so those have been cut in half and then cut in half again. Though, this is the highest resurgence in 10 years, but nothing like 92.
I just in reading some of your work, you talk about how you were excuse me, I was gonna say you were young. You are young, but when you first got there, you were very young, and the beard was probably dark brown, black, and you were riding around, right? You were riding around at night in the projects. You were very, very visible, and I would have to assume, and I think you wrote this, that it's not sustainable, right? I mean, you're a human being. This idea of going out every single night and breaking up every fight, and I mean, you're only one person, right?
Yeah, well, it was different in those days. I mean, we had 8 gangs, and they kicked it in 8 really defined little areas.
Uh-huh.
So every night I would patrol, and I would go around and I would kind of see what they were up to. And again, all healing is relational. So you want to be in relationship and
Sure.
invite them into their own relational wholeness and encourage them to go home. And if they didn't actually live in the projects, which in those days was rarer, but it happened later on, where you had commuters, then I would say, I'll be back with my car. You're coming with me. I'm going to take you home. And usually, a stop at McDonald's or Jack in the Box would entice them to get in the car. Because if they weren't a target, then nobody would engage in target practice. So
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you laid an incredible groundwork, like you said, relational, knowing names, knowing nicknames, really getting to know the community. I was there in 2001, and I had the pleasure to meet with Father Michael Kennedy and at the time. And I think that the projects there had just been refurbished, if you will, or changed. I wonder how much of a difference like the physical surroundings made, because I know it at one time it was the poorest parish, west of the Mississippi, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton had a thing called Hope 6, which tore down a lot of public housing in the country, like Cabrini Green in Chicago, which was just enormous. And so people were up in arms. I don't know. I didn't really get it, because everybody who was, they either were, if they wanted to come back, they had a place and it was honored. And if they wanted not to come back, then housing authority found them a place. I remember all of us as priests, including Mike Kennedy, we would get invited to go bless, hey, come bless our new place. Well, I mean, good gosh, 2-story houses with swimming pool in the backyard, Section 8 housing. And you go, wow, that's amazing. So, I mean, they wanted to be able to satisfy everybody. And I never got the protest, frankly.
I see.
And there were a lot of protests, On the one hand, I always say, you can't on the one hand say we demand, decent living situation. And then the government says, okay. And then what do you say? Hell no, we won't go. Doesn't make any sense. This is kind of what you've asked for. So it was wildly less dense, and the density was a problem.
Right.
So if there were 8 gangs in the projects, now there are only 2, really. And even those are a lot of commuter people. And so, and all the living situation is really way better than it was. So, and it's a kind of a mixed income and houses and, Los Angeles Housing Authority, and then another kind of group was managing another part. So anyway, and things change, I mean, buildings have to come down because they're too old.
Sure.
And that's what happened. So, I mean, I get the nostalgia. I miss the nostalgia of it too. Senoras hanging clothes outside, and everybody's drinking coffee and chismeando, gossiping, So I miss that stuff too. I mean, but it's kind of a romanticizing that doesn't acknowledge that stuff is finite.
Sure.
It's interesting, they have showers now in the projects. They never had showers.
Oh my.
They had bathtubs. And if you went into any of the restrooms in the apartments, every bathtub had either one or a series of them, of those plastic like margin tubs. And that's what you did. You sat in the tub and you threw water on.
Wow.
And it's what people knew.
And
it was kind of like, yeah, now you're going to get a shower. How about that? No, we like it the way it was. It was kind of like that. So, but there's no question that it was dangerous, and
Mm.
there were shootings morning, noon, and night. I mean, toppling the buildings didn't, completely eradicate all that.
Sure.
Those six gangs that aren't in the projects are somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just not there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I felt like I got to sleep in hollowed ground. We slept in the second, or I don't know if there's 3 stories in the with the school now. I mean, I believe that's where the alternative school started, right? I mean,
That's right.
just we learned. So I came with a group from Santa Clara as a junior. Would have been 2001 actually, and I just I remember just the base community, las comunidades de base or comunidades base, the base communities, the women who did almost everything, right? Who, like you talk
Oh yeah,
about.
there weren't really any men.
Mm-hmm. The mothers, the grandmothers. I'm just right now remembering. I want to say it was a group called Sendero Seguro or something to that effect. Something about a safe passage, and they would walk the kids home from school.
Camino Seguro.
Camino Seguro. Just really living out the faith, and it was just such a beautiful thing. I wonder how you, with all the great work you've done, was making this into the biggest gang intervention center in the world. Am I quoting that correctly?
Yeah, the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet.
Uh-huh. With the bakery and with the jobs and with the tattoo removal and all of the incredible work you do, how do you find rest or peace, or is that not the right word for what you're looking for? I mean, you're human.
Yeah, I kind of don't run the place, but it's a totally team effort.
Yeah.
The homies always say we all have keys to the place.
Mm.
It doesn't need me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice, because the homies run the place. Guys who were trainees are now case managers, navigators, in
Mm-hmm.
charge of programs,
Mm-hmm.
which is remarkable.
Right.
And I hope one day, they all sit in my chair when I'm not there, and I'm not there a lot because I'm on the road. I mean,
sure.
I'll be gone a week now that we're back to flying.
Mm.
I'll be gone a week, and then I'll be in a week. And
Yeah.
they just do it. And we're going on a retreat tomorrow, all the case managers and navigators, and to a retreat house, and people are going to run the place while we're all gone. These are kind of key people, but I don't worry about those things. Everybody is invested, even in terms of the healing. You don't just say, therapeutic mysticism, which is what we say, isn't 15 minutes with your therapist. Everybody holds a piece. Everybody is contributing and giving a dose. Somebody was saying the other day about kindness. So you just try kindness, and then somebody said, I can't remember where I heard this. They said, well, what if it doesn't work? And then they said, increase the dose.
Yes.
Which is good. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Yes. Well,
so dosing is a thing we always talk about. So the guy on the curbside therapy, we call it, the homies who run the security, they're running down to people and, look, you can't go in there with a gun, and come on now, and that kind of thing. And
so my wife and I were in your office when we were about to talk to you to prepare for the wedding, for the mass, and just the night before there'd been a threat. And we were like, okay, do we go? Do we not go? Is everything okay?
What do you mean a threat?
There had been a threat on the building. This would have been in 2014.
Oh.
And I mean, cool as a cucumber would not begin to describe you. It was like, oh, all right, we're moving on. We're business as usual. and we were
I,
just so impressed.
I still don't even, so much so that I don't even recall it.
Exactly right.
You know, the first 10 years were bomb threats, death threats, and hate mail. A lot of hostility, never from gang members, but from
Mm,
people who demonize gang members, and it was a short hop to demonize me for helping them.
sure.
So, you know, that stuff happened.
Yeah. um, Such a sense of peace that's come, and you're very humble. Obviously, you talk about delegating and all that, but you've obviously set an incredible, again, foundation that it moves so smoothly. You always say, you say it in your books. I've heard you say it. I've heard you speak 5 or 6 times. You always say that there's not a single person that's joined a gang who was full of hope. Not a single one. Are you sure? There's one or two, maybe. No.
I always say there's no hopeful kid has ever joined a gang. I've never, I mean, again, it just stands to reason. If it's about a lethal absence of hope,
Mm-hmm.
am I sure of that? Yeah, positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's the baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you can exacerbate things with real life, over the top trauma and with mental illness, mental
Mm-hmm.
health issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the baseline is, if you're a hopeful kid, you're not going to join a gang. And so you kind of say, what is it? What produces hope? It's not. I'm going to get accepted into that college, and I can see it. It's not. It's nothing like that.
Mm.
It's not a blueprint or a plan. It's about people being connected. And if they're not in relationship with people who are significant, if they're not on a daily basis being cherished,
Mm-hmm.
then they can't maintain hope.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we always think it's about, we want to address gang violence head on, but it's never head on. It's underneath, and it's about something else. So
Right.
infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign. Watch what happens to your gang problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I could have you here for hours and hours talking about all the great themes and incredible stories. I thought we, cut it to a few, but you talk about the absence of hope. And obviously there's a lot of guilt and shame. I mean, all of us carry, but you talk about there's some, anecdotes about some incredible, one of the, I don't think you named him, and I know you use a lot of pseudonyms anyway, but in Barking to the Choir, you write this one homie says, I've been shot a bunch of times. I could fight anybody head up, that kind of thing. But put me in a room with a counselor, and I'm a little boy again. Right? Have you seen a
Yeah,
lot of?
that's a kid who's moved away, and again, I write about him again in this current book, and horrific things were done to that kid, unspeakable things, just jaw-dropping, take your breath away things.
Right.
Things that you just say, wow, that's not even possible that a human being would do this. Again, it's not to demonize the people who did it. People are, none of us are well until all of us are well. None of us are whole until all of us are. And so it's about, we don't want to get stuck in moral outrage, which just defines our tribal us and them. But is there room in our hearts for this kid who suffered so much, but also is there room in our hearts for his mom, who would take him out of school and say, we're going to the doctors, and she would take him, like fourth grader, to a strange motel and knock on a door, and the guy would hand the mom a wad of cash, and she left him there with this strange man for an hour, and he did whatever he wanted with him. And this was a steady diet of this. So is there room in your heart for this kid? That's easy enough. is there room in your heart for this mom?
Mm.
That's tough.
Right.
The problem is that everybody believes in a God that has room in God's heart for both mom and son.
Mm.
But we think that if we make room for the mom, we have to push somebody out,
Mm.
like push the victims out or the family members.
Mm-hmm.
And so God is always, I think, reminding us of how elastic our hearts are. There's room for everybody.
Right. Right. You write so beautifully about, this guilt that people carry, this shame, the one you talked about. I mean, he obviously, that was not his fault what happened to him as a kid, but we know about internalized shame, internalized guilt. And I'm not saying it as beautifully as you do, but this idea that like there's no need to like get redemption. There's just what Homeboy does is let's give them space. Right. Let's not
Yeah, I mean, it's
uh-huh.
not about becoming, it's not about behaving,
Right.
it's about belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about becoming a good person. You already are. So how do you recognize the truth of who you are?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about achieving something or measuring up. All you have to do is show up to your truth, and that's kind of what happens there at Homeboy. I've never uttered the sentence, I have transformed lives.
Right.
I've never uttered that sentence ever, except right now to illustrate that I've never uttered it. But it's because I don't believe it. I don't think it. I don't even, not even close, not in the ballpark, not in the city where the ballpark is. I don't ever utter that sentence because nobody transforms anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But you can create a community of healing where people are, reminded of their true selves and loving.
And what a
And
beautiful
that's the
community.
hope. Yeah.
What a beautiful community. You see the videos where you do the thought of the day, like on Facebook, and the meditations and the reflections, and like you see people hanging over the stairs, and people who probably heard it for the first time a long time ago. Now they're the ones doing the reflections. Um, like you said, giving them space. There was one person who was quoted in Barking to the Choir who said, "We got authenticity beaten out of us." You give them the space to be themselves, to get rid of that stupid mask,
Yeah.
right? That was a
Yeah.
quote that
But
really got to me.
that's why I think our secret sauce is the community, because otherwise a lot of cities kind of think it's about delivering services,
Mm.
and it isn't. It's about creating a place that cherishes and nurtures people.
Mm-hmm.
And the first stop is it a safe place?
Right.
So that's where you begin, and then people can inhabit their own nobility and dignity because they're with others in a community, and everybody's playful and laughing. And
Mm-hmm. Mm. I mean, I have a pretty big, but fairly limited understanding of Homeboy. I'm not, I don't work there full time, but I've had great experiences. And you really do mean it when you say, if someone's going to come to you and say, "Hey, I have some skills. I'm going to help these people. I'm going to help them. I'm going to lift them up, or I'm going to save them." Nope. Right. You'll say it very nicely, but it's like, well, okay, let me know when you're ready to, be part of the group. Right. Or I don't, you know,
yeah, let me know when you can be reached by them. I don't want you to reach them.
right.
Let me know when you can receive who they are. Let me know when you're ready to have your heart altered. The question isn't what you're going to do, but what's going to happen to you here.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people dive in, it's magical.
You write, "Wage peace by listening." Um, there's one homie named Carlos. I believe he's from El Salvador, and you write about his journey. I mean, just you would not wish it on your worst enemy. Literally got his clothes taken away from him at one time. He's wandering through a town naked, going on the bestia and the whole deal, right? And I just appreciated how you would praise him but it wasn't patronizing, right? It wasn't like, oh my gosh, good for you, what a determined person you are. But you just, you live with him and what he's gone through. You experience it almost like with him. That's true. It seems to be true empathy as much.
Yeah, it makes me. I don't know what happened to him. He came home, and that was a lot of years ago, and I haven't heard from him.
Oh
I
boy.
pray he's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Those who are unhappy have no need for anything in this world but people capable of giving them attention. I think of a coworker who used to always, her plan every day was, let me make a connection with every student today. Whether it's saying "Cómo estás," whether it's saying "Hey, I like your shoes," and I know that you do that on a daily basis. I believe one of the teachers who at Loyola gave you a little bit of advice before you started. Said, know their names by tomorrow. It's more important that they know you than they know what you know. I wonder how you go out of your way, or if it's just second nature now, to really eye contact, get to know people, get to know their nicknames, the whole deal.
It's hard to do. I look back on my early years, and you could have a conversation for an hour with somebody. I can't remember the last time I did that, except we're almost at it here. But I just can't do it. And I look at young priests who live in my house who talk about moments like that. I remember that too. Where it's like, oh, I just had this 3-hour conversation. And I think, I don't know. I'm not sure I'd give that much time to the Pope, because who has that kind of time? And I'm not happy about that, nor proud. It's like, but today they were hanging from the rafters, and it was now serving number 43. And it's hard to pay attention to that many people. And if forget it, when I walk down the hallway to go to the restroom, 9 people are following me into the restroom to plead their case and ask me something. And it's like, come on, leave me alone. But you're trying to be as attentive as you can be.
Right.
There was a homie named Jerry who's a handful, and so I was trying to get into the restaurant. We were standing at the door, and finally he said, "I'm gonna let you go in." I go, "Thank you," but he was going on all his woes, and oh my gosh, and they stole my this, and they stole my that, and my phone is gonna cut off. And it's like, and everybody comes to you with the most intractable problem, thinking that you're the proud owner of a magic wand. I'm not. So anyway,
oh boy,
it's hard.
Correct me on the acronym. Is it ACE? Is that index that goes from, I think, 1 to 10 about traumas that have been suffered?
Yeah, the ACEs study, the adverse childhood experiences.
I mean, your breath catches in your throat when you talk about, you said, I'm a 0. You wrote in one of the books, I'm a 0. Most of the people that I work with, they're 8s, they're 9s, they're 10s. And that's where the compassion comes from, because you understand fully how much they've gone through.
Well, that kid I was talking about, whose mom would take him out of school, he's a big old fat 10. Right. 10 is unthinkable. And again, doctors and people who know this will say, if you're a 4 or a 5, you're going to have health issues and socializing issues. Now wrap your mind around twice that.
Yes.
Which is virtually everybody has a 9 or a 10 who walks through our doors. Right. But we do have our narratives that need to be purified, like, people like from my experience. Well, we knew the difference between right and wrong. Our parents raised us right. Oh, no, slow down. You need to purify that narrative.
I see.
That's a great example of white privilege. And the fact that, you just won all these lotteries, and zip code and parents and education and siblings and everything. Every lottery, I won every lottery. And none of that speaks to moral superiority. So it's never about morality. Morality has never kept us moral. It's only kept us from each other. Yes. And we use it as a chance to to strike the distance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nearly exactly what's wrong in our country at the moment, is that we're tribal and we're distant, and it's us and it is them.
That's for sure.
And God doesn't know what we're talking about, because there is no them to God.
Mm. Wow. Are you by nature a patient person? You've talked about some of the, and I'm sure even the term success stories you would not necessarily agree with, but you've had so many incredible stories of maturity and just community and people being welcomed. But you write a lot about the slow work of God. Has that been something that you have really had to work at, as patience? Is that something that you knew going in would be something? How have you learned about
No,
patience?
I no, I mean, I think I've grown in it.
Mm-hmm.
In the early bad days, I was, fix, rescue, and save. That's crazy making. So then I just stopped doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're freer, then you are more patient,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't believe in success anyway.
Sure.
Not everything that works helps, but everything that helps works. So find the thing that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you're anchored in the thing that works, then it's all about achievement and success and measuring and outcomes, and that's a complete dead end.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think that. We really cast our lot with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's too bad, because in the end, everything that helps really does work too.
Right.
But not everything that works helps. And the thing is, find the helpful thing. They always talk about, Mr. Rogers says, in a crisis, find the person who's helping.
Mm-hmm.
It's equally true. Do the thing that helps.
Mm.
And we measure in a goofball way, where we pound the podium and we say, this works.
Right.
Yeah, but I bet it doesn't help.
Mm.
And that's the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at Homeboy, we really deal with the least likely to succeed, and we're reverse cherry pickers. So, and somebody asked me the other day, do people ever go back, to their old life? And oh yeah, only all the time. It's called relapse.
Mm.
But they'll never forget, uh, never forget
Mm-hmm.
what dose they received.
Right. Right. In going through your writing, the English teacher me, I'm looking for themes and themes and themes, and love for sure. Obviously, I mean, there's so much joy and joking, and inside jokes and off-color jokes, and inside jokes, and I seem to see that it's all about kinship, community. In in Bargain to the Choir, seek first the kinship and then see what follows. Right. There's an incredible story from Tattoos on the Heart. You're writing about, I think it's kind of like right after the sanctuary times, and what would that be, the mid to late 80s?
Yeah.
Right. And you kind of point around the church, and it doesn't smell good because you got homeless people, houseless people, sleeping there, and you're really using it as a community, right? And showers and breakfast and the whole deal. And you kind of, after a while, get everyone to say eventually, pues huele de rosa, huele a rosas,
Yeah.
right? This is really a church. And this idea of, I think someone came up to you after mass and said, it's a shame to see what's happened to the church.
Yeah. This used to be a church.
And what was your response to that?
And I said, well, the people here think it's finally a church. And then I rode off into the sunset on my high horse.
And fiend, right? That was a great line. That was a great line. Um, one of the kinship. There's Jim Carrey, who's become a fan. He's come to the cafe, and he's talking about kinship, togetherness, separation as an illusion. like I said, jokes and jokes and jokes. And you always say, and I believe this wholeheartedly, it becomes impossible to demonize someone you know, right? How do you get people to know each other who really could be enemy gang members, who could have personal beef, personal history? How do you, I mean, do you force them to get together? Do you give them the space? How does that work?
Yeah, you put them in the vicinity. You know, proximity is everything. So any way you can get people to hunker down and, um, you know, maybe they're making croissants in the bakery, but they're side by side,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
and they're not working things out face to face. They're just making croissants.
Sure.
But there's something that happens by osmosis, but it always happens
Mm.
where something breaks down and you kind of go, I think this guy's more like me than not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they kind of live from that place, and then it creates a disconnect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was a guy who I saw on a Monday, and he was smoking a cigarette out in the garden, and asked how his weekend was. He was just terrible. My car broke down in the middle of no damn where, and
Mm.
he goes, "You're not gonna like this, but I called my homies," you know, which is kind of, yeah, I didn't like it. I mean, it's like, don't reach back to that.
Sure.
And so he called the first guy, and the guy said, "You know, I'm in the middle of something right now," and called the second guy. "I'm over at my suegra's house, my mother-in-law's house. It's a big birthday party. If I left, she'd kind of give me the hairy eyeball." One after one said no. And then he said, "I called Lefty." And as soon as he said it, we just kind of let it hang there. And Lefty is his worst enemy in the world, who works
Mm.
alongside him in the bakery. And he said, "Lefty is from the gang that we hate the most. He is my worst enemy." And you know what he said to me? And literally, he could barely speak it because his eyes got all
Mm.
filled with tears. He said, "I'm on my way." And now I always, you know, I always say, does that always happen? Yes.
Mm.
Can I think of a single exception? No, I can't think of a single one
Wow.
where that doesn't break down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you can take that to the bank. That's always going to happen.
Yeah. Attention, focus, kinship, community. There's a great chapter. As a non-native speaker too, I love that phrase that you bring up. Aquí no más. ¿Cómo estás? O qué haces? Aquí no más.
Yeah.
Right? And you break it down into now, period, here, HERE, period, this. I am focused. I am with you. I'm in community. Whoopi Goldberg with a great line that you quoted about, she said she loves Pope Francis because he's going with the quote original program, right? Homeboy Industries, Dolores Mission, you definitely are on the original program, right? Jesus, not like you talk about, you know, religion and all of these outside things. It's really about the faith, and community is just, I can't emphasize enough how great the books are. The latest is up to date with what's going on in 2020, 2021. You end Tattoos on the Heart with a heartbreaking but also beautiful story about Chico. And he unfortunately was one that who you'd had to bury, right? And the mortician says something to the effect of, or you say to him, hearing all the stories and remembering the greatness of him, you say basically, what a great man, right? And the mortician said he was, right? And
But
you
it
were,
was in shock. We were at the cemetery, and I was finished
mm,
with all my stuff, and I had to walk away, and I just wept.
yeah,
And he came and stood next to me, which kind of broke my little time and space I wanted to have.
mm,
And then I felt obliged to break the silence. So I pointed at the coffin and I said, "That was a terrific kid," in a whisper. And he bellowed, "He was?"
mm.
you know, it was like it did not fit in his brain
Mm-hmm.
that a gang member gunned down in front of his house could be a terrific kid.
Mm-hmm.
But every parent would have been proud to call him their son.
Mm-hmm.
His
That's
name was Moises.
Moises. Que descanse.
Chico, they called him Chico.
Que descanse en paz. You.
And that was a lot of years ago.
Mm. You end with Danny from Barking to the Choir. There's a beautiful story about, he's like, I got air in my lungs. He got a couple bucks on him. And he basically, this idea of, I mean, I know I don't want to cheapen it, but, you know, pass, what do they call it? Pay it forward, right? And
Yeah.
he gotten so much help, literal, figurative help, if you will. He had his, you know, space to become himself and to become a great one, and, you know, to find himself. And he basically was like, hey, I'm ready to give that $5 to anyone who needs it more than I do. What a testament to the work that's done. You have provided, you tell a story in Tattoos on the Heart about Pedro, and he's been in rehab, and you give him time, and you give him your generosity, and you tell him you love him. And he, despite the fact that he lost his brother, whose brother died by suicide, in his dream he talks about how he found the light switch, right? and and I want to very humbly thank you for being, for helping so many of us inside and out Homeboy Industries to find the light switch, and to share your wisdom, because I know you're a very humble man, but you've done some incredible work and provided so much help for so many people. So thank you in the short term for being here with me today, and thank you for all the beautiful work you do.
Honored to know you. Thank you. I'm happy to be with you.
Been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Father.
Sure.